From purely an acquisition standpoint, it makes complete sense why someone would want to have seller financing. For example, as the buyer, it's obvious why I would want seller financing, but I can never wrap my brain around why a seller or a property owner would sell their property with seller financing. And then the more I talk to more and more sophisticated property owners, I started to realize that there's actually a huge incentive to sell with seller financing. And if you don't understand how seller financing is a customer service tool, you're never going to be able to find seller financing out in the real world, no matter how hard you try. So for example, there's a lot of people that will ask us, are you targeting distressed properties, for example? And the answer is no, because someone with seller financing has to have equity to be able to share. And if someone is in any type of financial distress, that person is not likely to be able to offer terms. Or kind of in other words said, or another way of saying this is people who have more to share, including equity. And so some of these benefits, for example, there are some types of people out there or some types of property owners where just selling their property is going to result in a huge IRS bill. So for example, if they've owned the property for a long time, they have a low cost basis, which means that they bought it at a very low price relative to today's home values or property values. And all of that profit that they've gained through market appreciation essentially is now taxable for that person. And there's only two ways to delay the recognition of capital gains. Number one would be through a 1031 exchange, or the other would be through some type of installment sale. Well, in many cases, we're able to structure these deals or structure these notes in a way where they're interest-only payments. And so it's possible that we could actually kick this can down the road for a pretty long time and continue to defer their gains. The second reason is selling this property also means that they're losing an income stream. And so seller financing or some type of installment sale now allows that person to maintain an income stream without having to fix toilets or manage tenants anymore. The third reason is using lending as an alternative to traditional investments. Now, most of the people that we're buying properties from, they're at the end where they're not looking for another investment opportunity. They're not looking for another property to invest in. And so right off the bat, the 1031 is off the table, and they know that they want to invest it in something because they understand that it's better than leaving the money in the bank. And so you don't have to be some sophisticated investor to realize that leaving your money in the bank is going to be probably the worst thing that you could do. Just through inflation alone, you're essentially eroding your wealth. And so you've got to be able to get at least a return that hopefully is going to be better than what you're going to get against inflation. And then the fourth reason is some type of legacy planning. When we structure these notes, we always put in a remainder beneficiary. And one of the questions that I ask property owners is there someone in your family that might want to own this property someday? And usually the answer is no. They might want the financial benefit of having the property, but they don't want the burden of owning that property. And so structuring a note with a remainder beneficiary in place is one way that that seller can still continue to take care of their family even after they've passed. And so essentially what we're doing is setting up some type of mini estate sale. And so once I started to understand all of this, and I can overwhelmingly position seller financing into the benefit of the seller, because again, the benefits are going to be obvious for me, that's when it really started to click. And once I started to understand that component, now I can start to build out a profile of who it is that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for someone who is selling an investment property, so non-owner occupied, because if they're selling owner occupied, they're exempt from paying the gains. If they've lived in that property for 2 out of the last 5 years, $500,000 exemption if they're married, $250,000 if they're single. And then the second thing is they've owned it for a long time, which kind of by virtue of owning that property for a long time, there's a few things that happens. Well, number one, they probably have a low cost basis. They've gotten market appreciation, so there's a pretty big spread there that they might have to pay gains on. And really as a result of that long-term ownership, so if someone has owned a property for 30, 40, or 50 years, there's a good chance they're probably either approaching retirement age or well into retirement already. So it also means that there's not another thing that they're looking for. So combine that all together, when we're marketing out to that, we'll call it that, the seller profile, there's a good chance that when we get a call off of one of our letters, they might actually bring up seller financing first, which makes the conversation very, very easy to have. They might not have the exact deal structure figured out, but I know that at the very least, they're open-minded enough to consider seller financing.